Welcome. I'm Winston Yo, Vice President and President-elect for 2021. I hope everyone is well and safe. So COVID-19 has affected all of us in one way or another. But before COVID-19, many urban centers were already experiencing systematic challenges and stresses. In Hong Kong, we were and remain divided over essential access to fundamental resources like affordable housing, office space, and education. The COEX series is where we take this moment of interruption to re-examine these three typologies, where we look for resources and design strategies to design more resilient communities for tomorrow. I have the pleasure of introducing Paul Z from New Office Works. Their Growing Up Pavilion has won the inaugural awards for Young Architects and Designers at the West Kowloon Cultural District. Without further ado, here's Paul.
Thank you. Thanks, Winston, for the introduction, and thanks everyone for joining us today. So co-living as a housing typology has been around actually for as long as the notion of community. It has taken many different forms, from monastery to dormitory and elderly homes, just to name a few. And the key to their success lies in the careful orchestration of individual and collective life. With the increase of urban population and the shortage of housing, co-living, which used to mainly serve a singular type of user in a relatively closed setting, has become much more diversified and accessible. However, it is not without its share of controversy, such as the size of living units and how to encourage interaction. Our speakers today, Yimei and Doris Su, bring us their insight of how they have tackled these issues through design, operation, and sense of social responsibility. Our first speaker is Doris Su, VP of Product and Technical Service for Escort in China. She received her degree of Business Administration and Interior Design in Taiwan and the UK. Subsequently, she moved to Shanghai in 2003 as an interior designer and has worked in the design field for a decade. And in 2008, she got an opportunity to work with Escort, a major service apartment operator and a member of Capital Land Group. And since then, she has overseen more than 100 projects from concept to completion. Please welcome Doris.
Thank you.
20 years of professional experience internationally, she is now focusing on her efforts on developing the architectural concept of co-living in order to enhance the user's experience. So without further ado, please welcome Yimei Chen.
Okay. Okay, hello everyone, I'm Yimei. So today we're going to share about our co-living projects, and we're going to go through our projects in China, and at the same time we want to introduce the idea of communitopia while we're working on the co-living projects, because co-living itself is, we see it as a utopian response to our rapidly changing society. So instead of just looking into providing affordable housing, we also want to use this opportunity to see how we can create a more caring community and integrate different user groups so that we can pool the resources together and build a new community use for the public. So they have been, we have been working on co-living projects since 2015, and we have projects from 100 meters square, just working on a public space for co-living apartments, or large scale neighborhood and community planning that is over 100,000 or even 300,000 meters square on a planning level. So there are over 80 projects that we have worked on and over 1 million square meter, in total. Of course, some are built, some are unbuilt, and there would be a total of about 25,000 rooms that we have units, I would say, that we have built. And usually when we're doing co-living projects, one challenge is that we're working with old buildings. So at the same time, we are also dealing with urban revitalization and how to readapt the building to new use. And a lot of the buildings in China that we've been working on, they are probably vacant offices that are in the middle of city center, or they are industrial factories that are no longer being used and at good location, good neighborhoods. So a lot of the times the clients would like to turn them into co-living apartments, which they would be able to generate better revenue. So when we're working on projects like this, there are a few issues that we have to resolve. One is access to the building, because it's a different use, different occupancy, so the access will be different. Then next two thing is about sunlight and also ventilation, which is very specific about living space, but they are probably different parameters when you're doing factories or offices. And usually the strategies that we will employ, including addition of skylights, creating interior or exterior courtyards, changing of the facade in order to allow more sunlight, and also sky garden spaces. And we take every single opportunities if there is like a little exterior balcony or roof garden somewhere that we can turn it into habitable space, especially outdoor space for the residents, because it's always very nice to have this kind of spaces in your living apartments. And there are a few strategies that we employ when we're looking at co-living. And then we'll talk about them as we went through the presentation throughout our different projects, and how we show how these strategies would actually happen in the projects. And so number one, we call it urban devices. So the reason is we are trying to use these urban devices to recreate. As I was mentioning earlier, a lot of these projects are actually urban revitalization projects. And as we look into the city that we are living in right now, there are a lot of memories or old neighborhoods, those kind of community values, community services that we used to have in the old days, they are disappearing as we are living in high-rise towers and very contained kind of neighborhood that are all fenced off. So we hope to use this co-living projects also as an urban device, so that we can recreate what we means for city, community, and also to reintroduce places like marketplace and street and alleys to the neighborhoods, and as well as connecting the different user groups that might be coexisting in the current neighborhoods. Because as you know, these projects, most of the time they happen in the city center, and they're actually maybe one buildings or some floors of an existing buildings that you have neighboring residents. So this is the idea that we come up with the community utopia, and the topics that we have today about communitopia, talking about how we connect to the rest of the world. So as we look into the global housing crisis, this is actually quite important to start with, because we know that in a lot of the cities, especially in the big cities right now, we are facing an aging population. So by 2050, the global population with age 60 years old is expected to reach 2.1 billion. In Hong Kong, by 2034, 1/3 of the Hong Kongers would be aged 65 and above. So the problem is that our current economic model is making ownership of a home very difficult. It also ties into some other figures from the US Census report, even though it's from US, but actually it's similar data in Japan, Hong Kong, China, and US or even Europe, is that we are having more household composition that are people living alone, and also married couples without kids. And of course, there's also new type of family household composition as well. So looking at these numbers, meaning that actually the age population, they may be living in apartments that are bigger than they need, while there is the young generation that finds it very difficult to buy and to be able to live in the city. So in order to balance that, co-living and also cross-generational co-living is one parameters that we want to look at in some of the planning, especially the bigger planning projects that involves different communities instead of focusing on one user groups. So the project that I'm going to introduce is the Baita projects in Beijing. This is actually an unbuilt project right now, but it's still ongoing as part of our research study. And it's a building in the city center of Beijing, inside the Second Ring Road, inside the West Second Ring Road, located next to the Hutong area. So this building is built actually in 1958, and it's one of the 4 buildings that is built within Beijing City in the northeast southwest corner as the first high-rise buildings in Beijing, and also in China, because Beijing is the capital. So they are a bit more advanced at that time. And also the first building that is having an elevator introduced. So when the building itself, even back then, is served as a purpose as a people's commute. And we want to take this opportunity, even this building has been vacant for a very long time, but because of its strategic location in a very nice neighborhood in the Baita area, where we have the traditional monuments as well as museums that is deeply rooted in our Chinese culture, and the neighborhood living environments of the traditional Hutong people. So you still see like old people sitting in the alleys and talking and kids playing on the streets, that kind of environments. And we would like to use this project not to be a fence-off community, but that it actually can open up and serve as a community catalyst in order to regenerate the whole neighborhood. The building is also very interesting, the fact that it has an elderly home already in place, and also a kindergarten. Currently in the project. So the rest of the area is being able to contribute to co-living apartments, which we would target for the youth and also family.
So this is actually quite an interesting mix of users, because usually I would presume what kind of typical co-living users that you usually have, and how is this like kind of trying to do something different? Would you be able to tell us a little bit more about like, the usual user group and then like, the kind of new targets?
Yes, so in some later projects, which is more specific small scale co-living apartments, they may be targeting on a lot of the time the youth generation, the younger groups. So they would have facilities that is catered more for sharing, and also to maintain their kind of daily functions while some of the facilities are not in the room. But the sharing and also community experience and activities and events are usually the focus point for those projects. But here, since we are mixing the cross-generation, so it's becoming something different, that you're considering groups that are actually old people or family and young kids, and that they're all living together. So we want to reintroduce programs that would be able to facilitate interactions among these people and to get advantage of what their needs and what they can contribute. Right. So for example, for the old people and the kindergarten children, they actually could have some share times, just share times, just to be with each other and be happy with each other, because the old people are actually very boring at the elderly home. And the kindergarten kids also would like to have adults that have more patience and be willing to play with them, which a lot of the time the teachers are very busy, and their moms and dads are also don't have the patience to play with them, while old people actually they love to play with the kids. And for example, also elderly with youth with some volunteer programs, so we can also generate another kind of living community where the youth will be taking advantage of the lower rent costs, but be able to contribute as volunteers to the elderly home. But also here here we call it a life matrix in the sense that not only the elderly model that probably some other projects have looked into, but we also want to facilitate the adult group and the youth group in terms of how the family and a lot of the times how we can care for the youth and guide them through the vision of what life is about. And also, for the youth and the kids, the teenager and the younger children, they also have, a different types of more social kind of interactions together. So this is what we like to introduce as a concept, and we actually have applied it not only in this project, but in the bigger community project where we are working on 100,000 meters square or 300,000 meters square, and they're actually different buildings and different groups, so that we would introduce, we would place these user groups into different areas in community so they can have something that belongs to themselves, some activities and facilities that are more catered for their age group. But at the same time, then you start to have blur the barrier and be able to have something a bit more ambiguous and that can promote interaction.
Do you see like this is something like is this something that you are kind of advocating, or is this coming from the client or from the community?
It's something that we're advocating, and this is a project that we start applying this concept, the life matrix concept, to now always called. So for a lot of it, we'll keep repeating about the 老中青少 to our client, and whenever we find opportunities that we can apply some of these ideas into our project, then we'll promote this to our client.
Yeah.
So I think in a way, a lot of this would not come from the client directly. They will usually just look at the business and how to generate the maximum profit, or the user groups within the project positioning they would look into. But the community aspects and also the how to interaction will usually coming from our proposal.
I think that will be really great in the future if we get to see this diversity community as specific which is this culture of inclusiveness.
It's just now that when we're talking about co-living at the beginning in our projectry, at the beginning we'll be more talking about youth apartments, providing affordable housing for the younger generation. But as the market keeps developing, and also as government try to intervene to make sure the communities are getting the kind of housing that they need. So then from the government perspective, and also in our research, we start to look into different types of co-living for the different user groups. And that would actually include not only the based on age and income level, but also family groups, retirement home also, but as a co-living model, and also more oriented to a specific gender. So there's actually female-oriented apartments, and also some business products, which is the co-living model is actually the business trying to employ a huge co-living apartments for their staff, for the factory workers.
Okay.
So, so here we start to look into the different user groups, like Paul was asking. Typically, we have the division based on the age and also the income level. But now that we are starting to look into more typology of co-living, we start to price and which is the typical commute. And like I was saying, some it's more family oriented or gender oriented. And it's because everything begins with people living. Starting with user groups, then we will look into their needs. So we'll develop our own user needs model. So this is something that we would develop for our different user groups. So each user group will have their own different design parameters because of the different needs. And as an example here, you can see that we will look into parameters, of course, rent, which is linked to their income level, but then also public space and the facilities that is being shared in the co-living space, and also the design inside the room and the equipment inside the room. So because the equipment actually links to the cost, so it's part of the business model that you provide something that is more bare minimum without a TV, without washing machine inside, or you when you cater for the high-end product, actually you would provide inside the room. And so that's why the public space, they would turn out to be different size depending on the different brands and the products, because that would be determined by the brand positioning and what they're trying to do. And then we'll also look at different room types that is based on the different user groups that would be targeted in the project.
Well, I think the mixture of social sectors and also like age and various professions are going to be, very interesting to be able to see. And also, like you were mentioning, like, this kind of thing actually has a huge impact on how the design and everything is. So it really is about, like, both the designer and the operator being able to set aside like just profit, but then to really encourage like social interaction.
Actually, from the business operator perspective, they set aside their profit.
Of course,
yes,
of
they
course.
will not.
So that's why the designer really has to push this even more.
And what we would do is we would have to. That's why we get into the business model. So we will actually have to have a very deep understanding of what they're trying to do. So we have to make sure we can comply with what the operator and the client wants. But at the same time, you can add additional values and potential to the project. So being a designer in a project like this is how we can use the opportunities to bring in additional values. So these are all additional values to the project, which may have social impact and also being the social responsibility of architect to do this kind of work. But then it would not usually would not come from the business side. But there are some projects that would be more government oriented. I would say it's because maybe it's coming up from the government's policy, so that the business operator have to follow the government policy in order to make affordable housing or a specific types of user groups that happen in the project. So for those projects, then there would be a bit more push that it's from the project itself that we can work with, and those are even better opportunities to be able to develop something fruitful for the community. So as we were responding to Paul's questions about how we can take this opportunity to design. So we actually have developed our own ideas of brand discovery. And when we were doing projects, a lot of the times as we're going a little bit forward and a little bit forward to the strategic positioning and project positioning and what the project is about. So then we start to work with our client in terms of defining the actual programs. And a lot of the times, since we are already, we have done already a lot of co-living projects and apartments in China. So the client will come to us based on nothing. They may just say.
So they actually don't know as much as you do. So.
They don't, because they probably know it's a market that they want to capture, and also it's the government policy is pushing in this direction. So it's something that they have to face, almost like a problem to them. Because
so your research then is also become like something really valuable to the clients, because you actually have done a lot of projects like with experience, like, and then you also are constantly searching for new ways of innovating this typology as a co-living.
Yes, that's correct. Because as a designer, from our perspective, we're able to work in projects in different cities and different types of projects, and also different types of clients. So in a way, we are more familiar with the general market. And while the business operator or the client, they might be only in one city, and they may only be familiar with certain types of products. So that's why we have a wide range of research supporting us through our project experience in order to help them to decide what they want to do. So we would, in cases like this, we would start with talking to them about branding and product design. And when we say product design, is we see actually the co-living apartment or the types of co-living apartments. Each of them is like a product, because for each product, then you will start to look at the target users, the needs of the users. So we'll start to run user needs model, and then we'll also do interactive experience based on business needs and also technical requirements. And so this is based on kind of like the project route. But at the same time, we'll look into from the branding perspective, like what is the brand value, the brand vision, what kind of message that they want to bring to the target user, and how you can implement the branding of the apartments. So from the two directions, then we would come out with prototypes. And these prototypes, we will suggest with our client, usually we'll do the first few projects with them as feature projects, mock-up. And through these mock-up prototypes, then they will be able to understand what they actually want.
Usually this prototype projects?
We suggest, usually for some of these clients, we'll do 2 to 3 projects. We suggest to do a minimum of 2 to 3 projects with them.
Okay.
So for us, it will be a series.
Yeah.
It'll be a series with them.
So each one like 10,000 square meters or like much smaller scale?
They would be mostly 5,000 to 10,000 meters square.
So still pretty big in the context of Hong Kong.
Yes. Yes.
So what is then the extent, like, where would the actual view, like how big is the real thing? Like, if the prototype is already 50...
we see the whole project as a prototype.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
We see the whole project as a prototype.
Right.
So the Chinese client, because they are looking into fast schedule, so they already have the project in hand, and the project cannot just sit there and wait for the prototype to happen, unlike life, which has a lot more time to do the research. They did research a few years back. So for a lot of these clients, they may already have 10 projects in mind, and they have no idea of what they want to do with the brand and what's the target user. So we are actually synchronizing and doing the project design and the branding together.
Right.
Yeah, and then we use the branding information to feed into the project design as we are going through the process. Yeah. And we also use the project design information, the actual parameters and also problems and solutions to the project design to feed it back to the branding.
That's actually a very non-linear process of designing, because usually like you have like SD, DD and so on, like like a long process until like it finally the space or the architecture opens, and you then realize all these problems that you didn't think about while designing. But then the process that you're describing, you basically are constantly getting feedbacks from the users and from how people actually use the space, then you can change the design so it's a very flexible way of working.
It's like how we do fast track construction. It's basically the same idea. So the nice thing is, because then not until you start to work on the project, the client start to internalize and realize what they need. Right. And what the market needs, because then the marketing department, the operation department, then they start to come into place, and then they will throw in requirements. But all this, it's hard to just imagine and give it to us as a branding requirements, or for us to just imagine to put it in as part of the branding. So what we'll do is, as the project design is coming to a certain point of finish, then we use those information, and then we update our branding design strategy, and then we can work with our SOP according to this. Because for some project, we'll actually do the SOP for them.
Actually, maybe we should look at like actual examples, and just to get a glimpse of what they actually look like, at the end.
Yes. So so we have to go a bit faster. But for this project, it's actually one of our earlier projects that we start to integrate the branding and the project design together. And we're working for Tujia in China, which is the Airbnb version of China, and they are focusing on more short-term stay, but their short-term stay is probably like a week to 3 to 6 months.
Okay.
Yes, so this is a kind of a new market as well. And when we're working on the branding side, we also start to look into the user groups and what it means for the home values, which is the brand values. And originally they say is 旅途中的家, which means it's the home while you're on journey. But we expanded and we actually hope to integrate the idea of family into the project brand. So we start to develop the inspiration life circle, and that we suggest to the client that we can actually design the product and develop it so that we can target for the different user groups which they are facing as a short-term stay operator, because they have a really huge variety of products all over the country. But by defining the products actually in terms of user groups, it makes things much easier, because then you can look into the needs of the customers, and that provide the specific facilities for this project. In this project, we also take opportunity to resolve the architectural problem that we mentioned at the beginning of the presentation about a deep office floor plate, and how we, through our planning, actually, instead of making 110 rooms with a lot of dark rooms and low quality room and space level, we introduced the idea of the living room concept. So we expand the corridor so that we don't have to come out from the room, but actually facing this long corridor, which usually I don't quite like when I go to a hotel. But instead, we make this into a living room, and we consider the 5 levels of the project as a big home for everyone, and to use it to because this is actually the Shanghai prototype project. So here we are trying to put in the different user groups and the different functions for the different user groups. So for the different level, we classify them as dining room, living room, kids playroom, and the workroom. But at the same time, it also means that we want a specific user types that may be placed more likely in this room level. And of course, they are welcome to share all the public space within the project. And the nice thing is that not only that we raise the project positioning, we'll say, because at first it's probably a very low-end 3-star projects, co-living projects, but then we're trying to turn it around. And so now of course the client have to invest a bit more, but they also have a much better gain. And the project is very successful. It has close to 100% occupancy rate since 2015, almost always occupied. Wow. But of course, it's a very good location too. But the most satisfying thing when we look at this project is the living room concept, and how we actually, when we were visiting and staying there, we see people that just leave their door open. And the people would be working outside, like the teammates, like colleagues, kind of business trip scenario. Then you will see people actually working outside or launching and watching phone in this space. For the family groups, the kids would be running around in the living room space, while the adults feel very comfortable, because it's a very cozy space, and you feel very safe inside here, instead of like a typical lobby space. And and then you can see also people that are coming to travel in groups, and that they would probably come out after they shower in their pajamas, and then they would sit outside in the lawn, and then they just chat for another few hours before they all go to bed. So it's a very interesting business model. Not only that, it's challenging the traditional short-term hotel or service apartment in terms of the space and in terms of the spatial arrangement, but also you can see that how the space can actually change the behaviors.
So I think this is a good point that we come to, because from what you are describing, this also could easily be categorized as service apartment or even a hotel, right? How would you see that this modes of co-living differentiates itself from the typical short-term hotel or service apartment typology?
So in terms of that, specifically for this project, when we're looking at co-living, first of all, it would be different from hotel in the sense that hotel wouldn't provide a lot of the living amenities. So here we will still consider a very simple kitchen counter where people can still make food if they want, although they're not actual cooking with smoke exhaust. And other feature usually in co-living apartment is a washing machine. So this project there, we were able to have the funding to put the washing machine inside the room. While some other co-living apartments, we might just use the shared laundry, shared laundromat like Life is having. But in any case, this would be a bit different than the hotel. And as well as for service apartment, because in the traditional service apartment, you may not have the type of community facilities.
Yeah, everyone is like by themselves, like in their own room sort of thing.
Yes, and then you may have a lot of business facilities in the traditional service apartments, and more like the traditional lounge space. But here you can see that the space is actually targeted to be more community, kind of vibrant
doesn't feel as cold, basically.
Yes, yes. It just really feels like an extension. I think the difference is this is especially the location of this living room. It feels like an extension of your room, of your home. While in service apartment, you still feel like you're going to a different space. You're going from a private to a public area, but these are more in the middle, in between. And then as well as when we're looking at hotel and service apartment, we have done our comparative analysis for most of our clients in the sense that hotel, they are more short-term, they're more targeting for short-term stay and full capacity service, while service apartment, they are for long-term stays, but they are also for full service. But for the co-living apartments, then we would be looking at more limited service. So different brands, they may have different strategic position, but they would usually focusing on providing less service, which means cost saving and easy operation from their perspective. And this project is our marina residence in Beijing, which is the project situated in the Hutong area. This project, when we received the project, is actually some rundown buildings, and they're quite broken into pieces. And we are trying to connect them and rebuild them into a co-living apartment. This is also for a short and long-term stay. And in this project, at the beginning is again targeting to be just a regular mid-range co-living apartments, but because of the very strategic Sanlitun location and also very nicely situated in a Hutong neighborhood, so we want to recreate some of the existing courtyard space that can talk to the neighborhood and also be able to turn it into co-living apartment that is targeting for a high-end audience. So in the end, we turn it around, and this project is renting for 15,000 to 20,000 a month for a room, even though they're very, very small room, because it's a very good location. At the same time, they are also the short-term and long-term use, so it's between this mix of a hotel and service apartment. And there is a portion of the building which has especially small rooms and lofts space that we suggest to a client that they can use it as an Airbnb model.
Can like regular people just walk in? Like, are there like components that like, maybe the lounge or the restaurant or like, just the neighbor, like would they be able to enjoy?
With the facade that is trying to introduce the porosity and then also the exterior courtyard space and the roof gardens, we encourage the client to open it. During operation, then they will have more concern. So they actually would open to the public and other outside groups during events, because they also host a lot of events and activities. But at other times, they might want to protect the privacy of the residents, so they would keep it of a more contained neighborhood. But still, I think by introducing a lot of this indoor, outdoor courtyard space and the roof gardens, so strategically, the residents are still connected to the people living here, even though they may be from very different groups. Because the neighborhood building may be a very traditional Beijing family, while they're looking into this building that may be used by travelers, business travelers, or expats, international communities that are renting these apartments.
So are there any sort of in this type of like neighborhood that you have inserted this new energy basically? But I'm sure that there must be daily operation that you have to take into consideration during design. Like, are there like things that either internally as an operation, or like to the community around? Like, what are the challenges that you find in dealing with this type of forces?
Actually, there are a lot of co-living apartments. They tend to open to the public, and especially the common space, the public space, with a lot of the lounge and cafe, library facilities. They're open. They're open to the public, and it's very nice because as you start to look into some of these functions, then we will identify them as kind of fully open, or more ambiguous, like semi-open, or more private, like the gym, and like a workspace. Then they may be more for the private, while the reception area and some of the cafe and library, they're more open to the public. So when we are doing the design, we will also look more strategically into how we can define the functions per the different projects into different modules, so that we'll insert these modules into the project and start our planning based on the importance of these functions to the user groups, to our residents inside the building, and at the same time, according to the operator's wish. Because it depends also on the project location, to make some space open to the public. So, for example, this project in Beijing Sanyuanqiao, it's actually one of the feature projects of the Mofang apartments in Beijing. So this is where they would bring their clients to whenever they want to see their best project.
Like the showroom of co-living.
Yeah, it's like the showroom for co-living, the showroom of their brand. And here, what we are trying to do is, besides satisfying what they want for the customer, we also introduce flexibility model for the main space. So we are designing it so that the space can change according to the different scenarios, which usually happen for co-living projects when the residents may want to do different things at different times, and operators may want to introduce activities for the residents or for their own training. And at the same time, when it's open to some outside groups, then they can also change the setup of the space in order to be able to make it flexible. One reason also being it's a smart way to use the space, because the amount of public space that the co-living brand are willing to give out to the public, they actually, just like when we do real estate, they have to share between the residents. So shared not only meaning the functions, but also the cost. So the more public space you allocate to the brand, it would be harder for them to break even the balance. So for a lot of these typical projects, they may assign something 100 to 300 meters square, depending on the target user group. So if the high income user groups, they would be, the rent is higher. So you'll be able to assign more space for the public facilities and provide a bit more. But for some lower products, then they might just assign minimum 100 to 150 meters square. So when you have very little space, but you want to accommodate the same functions for the shared community, so then you would try to figure out ways to do smaller modules, more flexible modules, and that's why the programming flexibility is important in cases like this. And at the same time, like we were saying at the beginning, whenever there's outdoor opportunities, we also take advantage, because outdoor space is not counted. So, but it really depends on the projects and the architectural parameters that we were given. But for example, this same client, but a different project in Shanghai, we actually have a really big courtyard. So we would figure out ways to do inside-outside connections, and also we would design the courtyard space to be part of the co-living space.
Mhm.
So that's why for some of these projects, when we have roof gardens, when we have courtyard space, when we can do a little sky gardens,
Mhm.
then all those can be added to the functions of the co-living community. But at the same time, they're not eating up. They're
Right.
not eating up the GFA.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think all these lounges and communal spaces are great. Like they look stunning. I'm just also curious, like given the amount of projects that you have done, like are there any sort of special share space or communal space in addition to lounges and cafes that you found surprisingly popular? That you can share with us.
Yes. So so I'm going to share about it's actually the live projects that we'll share, which Doris already did an introduction in the beginning. So some parts I could be shorter, but what I want to talk about is how we start with the design, and instead of looking at just the operations and the functions, but actually look into the behaviors and the experience. And it's actually these parameters that start to inform what the space should be. Instead of talking about laundromat, but actually what's happening in the laundromat and what kind of experience our users are getting while they are doing the laundromat. And for example, like in the live program, what they have done is they have introduced games area so that you can actually play while you're waiting. And when we are looking into behaviors, that's also based on user groups. So as we were saying, for the different user groups, like the live is targeting a millennial, so then we will have to look at the traits of the users. But to deviate from the standard space and actually looking into the experience would means that they are actually providing not only the space, architectural space, but actually the activities and the interaction, how to promote the interaction between people.
Right.
Between people that is living there. So then the experience would become the experience while you cook, while you play together, how you can do concert shows or how you chit chat, and also the online experience. And by doing some research of what the user groups needs, then it's actually the programs are designed around not the needs, but also what they are opting for from the millennials' perspective. So instead of just the functions, they're actually looking for experience, like how to have fun, how to be free, like live your freedom, how to be free, how you can have fun, how you can enjoy life, and how you can have a different kind of social interaction experience. And it got to be interesting. Yes. So the whole brand is evolved about how you can do something non-traditional, and it could varies from the spatial design, but also from the inside, outside, 2D, 3D dimensions. It's okay.
Switch to your screen.
Yes. And so I think it's the share screen. Okay, 可以吗? Okay. So sorry for breaking, but we are going to wrap up. But here, this map is showing when we were talking about that we design not according to the functions, but according to the experience. So we also start to look into the experience as the residents arriving to the project, that they are experiencing how to say hi, and that they unpack, and then they refresh in the room, and then how they connect, and the different space that is catered for this type of social interaction and connection. And by doing this map strategy, we would link them back to the actual space, and that we would envision how our residents, when they come in and how they go through the space, as a way to interact with the space, the functions, and also the the rest of the people. And it all comes from not only the inside, but also the outside, at the public front. And the social kitchen, as Doris has mentioned, and a new kind of way to envision meeting space. So the swimming pool is actually a place supposedly for meeting, but instead of a traditional conference room, you see a very relaxed and kind of more multi-purpose gathering space.
So instead of a pool party, you have a pool meeting.
And you still can have a pool party. That's the cool thing.
That's,
or you can have a meeting that is the pool party.
Mm-hmm.
And here we also introduce interactive elements. Like, for example, we want this to be like a bubble machine, so that actually when there are people inside and when you're actually having a party, not a proper meeting, then you'll be able to have interactive elements in the space. But of course, at the same time, when you actually have a real meeting, there will be projection screen and other amenities that would be able to cater for such things to happen. And Paul is also asking for some surprising elements that happened in the co-living space design. The jam room is actually another ideas that is coming from the Live brand. But when I went to visit the SMU prototype in Singapore, which they have the early pictures that I was showing, the 3x3 grid, they're actually the prototype that they built in Singapore at the SMU. And they're using these millennial groups to test out the functions that they want to incorporate in the final brand. And surprisingly, there are some functions like the social kitchen. That's why now you see in the Live product, we have a huge social kitchen elements. It's proven very successful in the Funan project, their first launch project. But also the jam room is another interesting functions that in the SMU prototype, they only have a very small room, like maybe almost like just a 2x3 meter square room. And then they put some musical instruments there, but turns out it has a high booking rate. So there are a lot of students that will go there to sing and play a band song or just to listen to music. So it becomes a very interesting when you probably wouldn't think these functions would be popular or even think of it as part of the functions of the living environment.
Unexpected,
yes.
as a program that you would insert into a co-living.
Yes, but in the end, a jamming room like this, a social kitchen, or in some other projects, we would introduce elements according to the specific project, so that they would be more catered for the groups that are living there. And as Doris also was mentioning, in Live, they actually the 2-bedroom apartment, 4-bedroom apartment, or 6-bedroom apartment, which turns out that they are renting it for like travel companions, or the 6th room are actually rented to the corporate enterprise all year around. And it's used a lot for the corporate teams that would need to travel and stay for project, maybe every month, for a month long or 3 months long, and then we just rotate internally. Yeah, so that's why those rooms turn out to be very popular. And then this is our second Live project in Jiangjiang, also Shanghai, and it would also be similar strategy that we have used. So this is our Communitopia idea, which ranges from different project types and different groups, and hope to share some of our ideas with you.
I think that's actually a lot of information, to be fit in such a small amount of time of presentation. So for now, I would like to open up the floor for the audience. Please type in your, or even like you can speak up via the video and the audio.
Switch the camera to you guys.
Okay.
We can stop sharing.
Stop sharing.
first.
Yes. Okay. Good.
Okay.
Does it work? Yes. Good. And,
Let's have a
so
look
we go
at
to
the
Q&A direct.
Yeah. I think it's just in chat.
Just in chat.
Yeah. So okay, let's see what we have. I think there was
a Q&A.
Yeah,
but
there was a Q&A.
Where is the Q&A?
Yeah.
I cannot open the Q&A.
When we click, there isn't, or maybe it's a different window. Let's see if there's a different Q&A window.
Yes.
If not, we can scroll here.
All right. Okay. So the first questions are the multi-bedroom arrangements co-ed or separate or man or woman?
Yes, I think for the live projects that we were sharing earlier, there's no specifics about gender in those rooms. And like Doris was explaining, those like the 4-bedroom and 6-bedroom would be rented as a whole to the same group. So it's something that they will resolve internally. But there are other co-living apartment projects that they would usually the female-oriented ones are quite popular because of the concern of privacy. So it would be more project-specific.
Okay. So the next question is the cross-generational living concept seems to have strong potential for aiding in affordable housing opportunities. Have you worked with government yet to put in place this idea?
I think we briefly touched base of this point earlier, is that most of the projects we are not working with the government directly, but there are government policy in place that is pushing the developers and business operators to provide affordable housing for the city. For example, recently, actually it's already almost 2 years now, the China government have introduced because they're trying to control the real estate market. So they have introduced something called 租赁性住宅, which means that they have to force the developers to build a certain number of apartment units for the general public. And for some companies that actually kind of state-owned, in a way, they would have a much higher KPI to meet. And when we actually work with some of these clients, and when we work with them, then the number of units and the areas that they're developing is actually very, very huge. Yeah, it's almost could be considered a satellite city in Hong Kong.
Wow. Okay. So actually, the next question is from Winston. Do you actually want to just ask it rather than me repeating the question?
The flexibility that you described in your projects has huge potentials to address many of the social stresses, especially when you have diverse user groups in the mix. For Asian societies such as in Hong Kong, there's a strong, ownership is so ingrained in the culture. There's a potential to help a lot more people if they can pivot from ownership to access economy, which is what I assume this relies on. Do you see that? How do you help in the branding, perhaps? How do you help people pivot from ownership to access economy? Or do you not even see that as a need in the trend?
No, I think it's already happening. Yeah. Actually, I think in the millennial group, you already see that they have a very different mindset to like the Gen X, and they are not looking forward to owning an apartment as much, but maybe it's just a wish from the parents for the kids, and they are very open to living in different cities and different communities and not have to own something, but just to be in a shared mode. And that's why co-living and co-working is actually very popular in China, because they don't, I think for the millennial groups, they don't see the ownership as important as we thought they will be. Yeah, so I think the trend is already happening. It's just that how we see it and how we work with it or work along it to promote other things that we want to build for the community.
Okay. Next questions. What do you see for the future of co-living based on your past projects? As in, what new cities and new project types do you see strong interest in need? Are you working in other countries, cities, or even more remote locations? For example, high-rise or even greenfield or suburban locations seems a lot of opportunity.
Yes.
So anything outside of the urban area?
Yes and no, but the urban area would definitely be, because the urban area, it has the biggest problem for housing. And because people still want to live in a big city, when you go outside the urban area, you have a lot more space and you have a lot more building types that you can work with. So co-living becomes more an experience that you want to get. So that actually respond to the first questions that it was mentioned is the future of co-living. As we have been working since 2015, we can see that it is already evolving from creating a little living model, a shared space, to satisfying government requirements. And then now we're in the stage of creating experience and a new type of experience. And that once you move into this stage, like many other things that are evolving in the society, is you will start to have different interest groups. You would do products that is more targeted to specific interest groups. And then also you would focus more on customized experience.
Right. Okay. Next question is again, Winston.
Any thoughts on adapting some of the lessons and strategies you've picked up along the journey for the Hong Kong market?
Yes, I think this is something that I have been I've been thinking. For the past few years, as I was working on mostly projects in China, but at the same time, it's a lot of challenges in Hong Kong. And I think one thing being is how we can redevelop a lot of the properties that we have, right? I think it would have to go back to the policy of how we can make it easier for such conversion to happen. Last year, our nomination committee have awarded Lighthouse. As an example for creating affordable housing in Hong Kong. But actually, instead of just looking at providing the housing, I think they also did a very good job in terms of providing some social interactions among the residents, and putting together the right user groups and the user groups that is in most needs that they can accommodate, like some single mother with kids, and providing additional foster care. So I think there are things that could be done, but of course, just looking at the Lighthouse project, it has a lot of policy and government support behind to make it happen. So unless we get more support from our government in changing how we can redevelop our own neighborhoods, which has been a problem since 20, 30 years ago when I was doing my thesis. So and still a lot of things are waiting to happen. I think if we can get some relaxation, maybe not the total change, but some relaxation on some properties, then we can really start to look into working on a co-living model that is more specific for Hong Kong.
Peter, just want to ask to clarify the organization who won our community citation is called LIGHT-B.
Oh, LIGHT-B. Sorry, sorry, Peter.
Well, let's try to go through the rest of the question. I think we have 3 or 4. So there was one comment from Ken. Which presentation? Well done. Look forward to your new strategy on post-COVID-19.
Yes, we are watching.
That's actually one of the questions. But since Nelson already asked the question, I would maybe save it for the last. Let's go into the first one. WeWork, the fall of WeWork,
Yes.
Is that affecting any of the co-living business?
I don't think it's affected. It's actually a good compliment. Like for example, in a lot of the projects, we would include WeWork as functions, as a key functions actually. For example, like they talk about co-living and co-working. So we actually design a space so that it can cater for co-working, and you can see a lot of people actually working in the space with a laptop or doing casual meetings. So it's actually a compliment, and we are developing some co-living models that actually have a co-living models with it. There are some previous projects that we actually have them right next to each other, but they may be operated separately. And now it's evolving into something that's actually just mixed in the public space, and then you can just use the space whatever and whenever you want.
So the residents actually didn't have to pay extra to use the working area.
No, but they might have to. They may have a booking system if it becomes too popular. So if no one's booked, then you can go into those conference rooms anytime you want. But if if they becomes popular, then they have a booking system.
That's actually quite a good bargain. You get to live and work at the same place.
Also, it's very good for the business travelers that maybe I go there to work for 3 months. I actually do not want to. I don't have a good business areas inside the room for sure. So if you're able to use the space, but it's catered for kind of like more a working mode,
Right.
even though it's a bit different, but yeah, it's very convenient. Yeah, very convenient.
Okay.
Disabled, yes, they are.
Disabled,
They are considered by code.
Repeat your question.
Are the needs of disabled people considered in the design of co-living space?
Yes, they are. By code they are considered. So I mean, as per code, disabled person need to have access to the whole building, and their rooms specifically designed for disabled person.
Right.
They will be specifically designed. Yeah.
And how do you control the accessible areas such as laundry, gym, guest room? Do you need to take part in sourcing the security system, door lock system? I bet that this is probably from a security supplier, but fair questions. How do you control them?
And most of the space are just open. Most of the spaces are just open. Sometimes they would be integrated within the guest card, the guest room card.
Like a swipe.
Just a swipe card. So and the SIM card will get you into the room, and it's just any hotel. It's the same system that hotel uses, but it will just be different assets that you're being granted. And we would be involved when we were choosing the design for these systems.
And the last one is how do you differentiate co-living model and service apartment? Which we kind of lightly touched upon. Maybe you would elaborate a little bit more.
Yes, I think the co-living model, like we were emphasizing, is service apartment. Most of the time, first of all, the user groups and the unit types are differently designed. Co-living, we are still working on a much more lighter model. So inside the room, a lot of the time we don't have as many amenities like the service apartment.
Right.
Yeah, equipments and electronics, etc. They would be, like a simple version for the service apartment, and we'll put all of these functions in the public space, which traditional service apartment they probably wouldn't have. As well as besides the functional facilities, there will also be this shared community aspects and the experience aspects, and what we're talking in co-living, and those are also not right now exist in the service apartment model.
So I think that brings us to the end of today's webinar. Thanks everyone for a lot of great questions. To wrap up, we have Winston to give us a last word.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Yimei.
Thank
you, Paul. It was wonderful. Please do click on the poll button below and give us some feedback so that over time we can develop potential for deep dive sessions and so forth. And also stay tuned for the next one, which is going to be on co-working on May 28th. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Can everyone see the poll button?
Up on the screen.
Yeah, they can see it.
Yeah, okay. Great.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. All right, stay safe, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.